Okay, everybody, we're going to finish up this section of the course by talking about something called Hardy Weinberg Equilibrium. I don't remember who came up with this. It was two people. But anyway, let's take a look at this Hardy Weinberg stuff. Okay? So, this is a mathematical model that we use to figure out if natural selection is happening to a particular locus. That means a gene, okay? So, there you go. People at home, am I glitching? Are you okay? Looks like you're okay. Okay. So, this is basically a way for biologists and biology students like you to determine what's happening, okay? And so when we say that, well, what it's going to tell us is there are no differences, so the population's not evolving, or there are differences, so the population may be evolving, okay? May be evolving. So many icons and things in the background. All right. Let's take a look at how it works. All right. So this principle basically states that the frequencies of the alleles and the genotypes in a population should stay the same from generation to generation if Mendelian segregation and recombination is the only thing at work. If there are other pressures at work, then this is going to change. So like the beaks we just talked about. So you really need to understand something. This is a hypothetical sort of lab perfect model, okay? It's a model. In the real world, populations and allele frequencies almost always change over time, okay? So we don't really see this, we don't really get perfection when we examine real world situations. Now, here's a reason why it's so hard. You have to have 5 things be true at the same time in order for this to work, okay? So let's look at them. No mutations, okay? That's easy to maybe measure when it's only one gene, but it can be hard to like say that, oh, there's no mutations. That can be very hard to measure. Random mating, okay? That usually doesn't happen in animals, okay? Plants, a little bit easier because they really don't make a lot of choices. They just make pollen. But there's still factors that could be involved. Pollination is influenced by things like insects. So maybe insects go to the flowers that are brighter colored or easier to get to, or so even plant mating can be influenced by non-random things. Okay? No natural selection. So this would mean there would be an environment with very little to no pressure, okay? So no pressure. Extremely large population size, okay? Extremely large population size. You have to have a big population to ensure adequate randomness, okay? If there's only a very tiny population, then just a random chance could really, really sway that population one direction or the other, okay? That's one reason why this is hard to do in a lab, because large population. No gene flow. That means no exchange students are coming into the gene pool. Okay? No blue jays are flying from place to place. All right. Those 5 things have to be true. You should have a good idea of why, okay? So if you want to keep the population in equilibrium, all of these disturb equilibrium, okay? All of these are going to disturb equilibrium. Okay. So if you are not meeting all 5 of these simultaneously, then small amounts of evolution are going to happen because of the factors listed there. Mutations, gene flow, natural selection, sexual selection. Okay. So, there are 2 formulas to look at, and they are, have you guys done simultaneous equations in math where 2 equations are true at the same time? That's kind of what we're getting into. Now, these are a little rough on people who might be slightly dyslexic, because you got the P's and the Q's, okay? And those can be hard for some people to keep separate. I don't know why they picked those 2 terms. I'm sure I could look it up, but just mind your P's and Q's, as they say. All right. Here's the second equation. So what does this mean? Okay? You could set this equation over here equal to P and then substitute everything into this equation on the right, okay? So you're going to have to be slightly familiar with simultaneous equations. The P and the Q equals 1 is true for both equations at the same time, okay? So what do the terms in the equation mean? P is the frequency of the dominant allele, and Q is the frequency of the recessive allele, okay? So, if you look at the allele frequencies, so it's 50-50, 0.5 plus 0.5 equals 1, okay? So the ones here are like 100%, okay? Over here, what would you be if you were dominant? You would be, what would we call you? Homozygous dominant, right? So that'd be like big A times big A. That's what P squared is, okay? So try to keep track of this, okay? The P squared in this equation is the number or percent of individuals that are homozygous dominant. So big, okay? Now, just think about what, let's say the allele we're talking about is A, okay? So big A is the same thing as A squared, right? Does everybody like agree with that and follow that? Okay. Little a is Q squared, okay? And then 2PQ is heterozygous. So let me show you what I mean. Just so I can add it onto the video here. All right? So these are going to be the percent of A's in the population over here. The percent of little a's in the population over here. This doesn't tell me anything about like how many hetero or homozygous there are. It could, if I said 100% of the population is homozygous dominant, it could, but it usually doesn't. Over here, this is going to be your big A, because a squared is equal to, like, so that's why that's like that, okay? 2pq, this is the number that are heterozygous, and over here, this is the number that are homozygous recessive. And those are always percents or decimal percents that add up to 1, okay? It's not very hard. It's just a little bit of arithmetic. There's nothing crazy happening here, but know that these equations can be, they're simultaneous. They're both true at the same time. So that means if you set one equation for one of the terms, you can substitute in and figure out everything else. Okay, let's see how we do here. So if you're told that 20% of a population is homozygous recessive, what term would that be? That would be q squared. All right, so another example. You're told that the frequency of a dominant allele in a population is 75%. Doesn't say anything about genotypes or phenotypes. What variable are they talking about? They're talking about P from the very simple equation. But you can substitute P into either equation to solve, okay? If you have one term, you can solve everything else, because you know that if they give you this 75%, you got to solve for Q. What would Q be in this case? 25%. Then you substitute 0.75 and 0.25 into the equation, and you're done. Okay? So, as far as the math goes, the formula you start with depends on what you're given. Okay? If you're given anything that has to do with allele frequency, you're probably going to start with Q plus P equals 1. Okay? Or P plus Q equals 1. So, allele frequencies means you start with just the P and the Q equals 1. Okay? If it gives information about individual organisms' populations, it's probably referring to the one with the exponents in it. Most of the time, you have to use both to solve the problem. Okay? Now, which one is going to, as a geneticist, which one would be the easiest to be, well, those are the P's or those are the Q's? Which one is going to be the easiest to tell? Okay, let's say I have rabbits, black is dominant, white is recessive. Are all black rabbits big A, big A? No, okay? So if I have 100 rabbits and 75 of them are black, does that tell me anything about how many recessive? It doesn't really tell me their alleles, does it? Okay, you see what I'm talking about? Now there's information I could work out there. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. But usually they give you Q because Q is an absolute. The only way you can be recessive is if you are little a, little a. So those would be my Q's. Okay, 25% equals Q. I can't really say how many equal without knowing some more information. So usually they give you Q and then you work back to P. But there are some problems where you don't see that. Okay, what are some tips to figuring out these Hardy Weinberg equations? Let's go through. I know nobody likes to do this, but I've been doing it for a long time and I still write them down because I know that that's going to get me there. Okay? Figure out what they've given you and figure out where you need to go. Okay? No matter what they're asking for, solve for the value of P and Q first, and then go solve for P squared, 2PQ, and Q squared. Okay? Because if you know the value of P and Q, you can solve any question. Okay? So a lot of times you want to get to P or get to Q, because as soon as you know one of them, you can figure out everything else. But you have to do it in order. Okay? Make sure that you actually use a calculator to do the square and square root functions. One of the most common mistakes is people like not knowing that the square root of 0.25 might be a little different than what they expect, so they kind of like just skip over that. Okay? So make sure you're using your calculator. It's there for you. Make sure you take a calculator on test day. You will almost certainly have one of these problems to either solve or to confirm an answer or to just, they almost always show up. Okay? Double check, that goes for almost all math problems, okay? Nobody likes to do it. Nobody likes to do it. But make sure things add up to 100%. All right. I'm not going to make you watch this video, okay? I would like to jump right into doing some practice problems because I think I'm right here with you. I think we can work through this pretty easily. All right. Let's work through one of them right here together, okay? You have a sample population, and 36% are found to be homozygous recessive. What is the frequency of big A and little a? Okay? I want you to actually break out some paper and start following along with me. I should see everybody should have something to write on. Okay, old-fashioned mathematics, here we go. All right. I'm getting my calculator out. I'm getting it all. All right. You guys know the phone calculator, you turn it sideways. Everybody knows that, right? All right. First of all, these are the two equations. Where in these equations would this plug into? As I have it written, you are right, but where would I plug it in here? Which term in these two equations does Q? Okay. Are you saying that this is this? Okay, Q squared. Okay, make sure you know the difference. So, this goes right here. Okay? So, 0.36. What's the square root of 0.36? What is it? I'm sorry, I can't hear you guys. 0.06? 0.6. All right. Now, if Q equals 0.6, what does P equal to? 0.4. Now, all I have to do is go plug everything into the equation and I can solve. So the frequency of A, but we don't really have to do that. Okay, they're not even asking me for what all this is, okay? All I have to say is big A equals 40% and little a equals 60%, okay? So that's really all I need to do. Let me clear my stuff out and look at the nice Okay, you're given that. Solve for P and Q no matter what. Okay, so there you go. Somebody told me that. Plug it in there. Okay, that's what we came up with. All right, mathematicians, people who are afraid of math, this isn't that hard, okay? It's not anything other than like junior high algebra, okay? Not that hard. All right, let's try this one. We're stepping it up a little bit on this one. Okay, what's 10% going to be? So Q squared equals 0.1. What's the square root of both sides of that? I believe it's 1, right? Or point, no, it's not. So what's the square root of 0.1? Help me. I do too. I cannot do them in my head because I want to say, oh, it's 0.1, but that's what it is, so it's not 0.1. What is it? 0.316. Okay, so Q equals 0.316, okay? What's P equal to now? 0.684. All right, now we got to substitute in because what they're looking for is how many homozygous dominant and homozygous and heterozygous individuals in the population. Okay? So, what is 0.68 squared? 0.468. That equals my P squared, which is going to be my homozygous dominant. Those are my big A, big A's. Okay? What is 2 times 0.31 times 0.684? What is that? Say it loud for me. I hope that you're doing the numbers right. 0.432. So that percent of people, so 43% are going to be big A, little a. And we already know the 10% of them are little a, because they told us that. So if you add those up, that definitely looks like it is 90 to me. So 10% are little a, which they told us. These guys here are 43.2%. And these guys up here are 0.468. All these numbers right here should add up to 100. And they do. Okay, they do. Everybody following it so far? All right, I'm not a formally trained math teacher, but I think I can handle a little bit of this. They probably are better at this than I am. All right. Okay. They all add up to 100. All right. A recessive genetic disorder occurs 7% of the time. What percentage of the population is homozygous? Okay? So we don't have to do all of them, but let's start off with solving for P and Q. Okay? So this time, 0.07. take the square root of both sides. Sorry about that. And you're going to get 0.26. See, most people will want to say the square root of 0.07 is 0.49 or something like that. Be careful, okay? Be careful. It's easy to screw up. I know my example there was a little bit ridiculous, but somebody over there said, I hate these decimal square roots. Just use your calculator. All right. One of the biggest mistakes I get is students like trusting their own knowledge of common roots. Okay? Oh, 0.81, that's 9. All right? I probably picked one that worked, but anyway. So we have 0.26. We have 0.26. We solve for Q. Okay? So we get that down to 55. We solve for Q, we figure out P, and we square P, and we get it to 0.55, 55%. Okay, let's do it one more time. This time, they're going to tell you how many individuals there are, what number of each one of them are homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and heterozygous. So you're going to have to just plug the numbers into the term. Okay? So you've got to we're basically given all the terms in the second equation, and we have to work backwards to the first equation. All right, for this one here, convert everything to decimals. That's easy, okay? Then start solving for them. Okay, so once you get to P and once you get to Q, by doing the square root of those terms, all you have to do is plug them into the other equation, and you know that they add up to 100%, so you know you did it right. If they don't add up to 100%, you may go back and check. All right. Everybody okay with this one? Do you see how it worked? All right, let's just review with the answers shown right away, okay? What's the difference between genotype frequencies and allele frequencies? Genotype is going to talk about how those alleles combine, okay? So what does that mean? Genotype is going to be like, how many combinations of big A are there? How many combinations of big A, little a are there? Okay? Allele frequencies are just how many are there in the population. Okay? So we could model that with those beads over here. We're not going to do that. We're just going to kind of do it on paper and mathematically. All right. When we look at Hardy Weinberg Equilibrium, we actually talk about it as like the null hypothesis of evolution. So what does that mean? Okay? That means if no evolution is happening, it should be in Hardy Weinberg Equilibrium. Okay? That means no evolution is happening, and we can assume if you see if a situation doesn't work for Hardy Weinberg, that means that one or more of those 5 conditions is not working. Okay, so think about that. Think about that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call it quits here today for this video, and we'll talk a little bit more on variations in populations next week.